We have made a lot of incredible scientific discoveries, and today most science feels more like science fiction because of how many accomplishments we've made that should be impossible. Our reality is having plot lines straight from a science fiction movie. Jurassic Park doesn't seem as fictional as it once did because we have discovered how to bring back extinct species. Thankfully, we haven't cloned any dinosaurs in a lab yet, but we have brought back direwolves. How does this work? What does it mean to bring a species back from the dead? Is it ethical? The first thing we need to talk about before getting into that is cloning and how it's led us to where we are now. The technology to bring species back from the dead wouldn't be possible without the discovery of cloning. It first started when scientist Hans Adolf Edward Driesch found that if you take the embryo of a sea urchin and shake it, you can get the cells to separate and have both separate parts grow into a full sea urchin. Hans Spemann, ironic that both of them have the same first name, wanted to separate the cells in a salamander embryo, which was more difficult because the cells stuck together. He took a hare to separate them, and they both grew up to be adults. He found that this wasn't as effective when the embryo was in a further stage of development. This process of splitting embryos is artificial twinning, and is one of the easiest ways to produce a clone. Spemann used the same method with a hare to prove that the nucleus of a cell could be transferred to another cell, leading Briggs and King to produce the first clone with frog eggs. They put a nucleus into a frog egg that had already had its nucleus removed, and it ended up developing into a tadpole. This is the first official time an animal had been cloned. This study showed that the nucleus is what makes a cell grow into a larger organism. This study also reinforced that cloning works best with cells in earlier development. John Gurdon, also using frog embryos, swapped an egg's nucleus with a nucleus from a frog's intestinal cell instead of from another egg. The tadpoles this made were genetically identical to the nucleus's donor. The experiments of swapping nucleuses were done on rabbits, becoming the first cloned mammals. Sheep were later used, and eventually Dolly the sheep was born, which was the first time a mammal had been cloned using a somatic cell, which is a cell other than a reproductive cell, similar to Gurdon replacing an egg's nucleus with an intestinal cell. A nucleus from the cell of a sheep's udder was used to clone Dolly. The next year, the first primate was cloned, and more sheep were cloned from genetically modified DNA. This technology was then used to make more somatic clones and even stem cells, which are cells that don't have a designated purpose and make up most of the cells in an embryo. Before I get into the incredible discoveries made by the company Colossal, which is the leading company in trying to bring animals back from extinction, I'll give you a little bit of background on them. Their company was only founded a few years ago in 2021, and they're based in Dallas, Texas. It was founded by two scientists, Dr. George Church, a former Harvard professor and geneticist, and Ben Lamb, an entrepreneur. There are currently 3 direwolves that have been de-extincted, 2 males and 1 female. De-extinction is the term used for an animal that's been brought back from extinction. Their names are Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi. Their genome was designed by changing existing DNA from gray wolves to be the same as that of a direwolf. The current direwolf doesn't share any more DNA with the direwolves that existed in the past than modern gray wolves. They live in the US, but their exact location is not publicly available. They have grown larger than gray wolves and have begun feeding on live prey, which are huge milestones in their development. 4 red wolves were also cloned by Colossal in an effort to save the endangered species from going extinct. The oldest red wolf in this group, and the first red wolf to ever be cloned, Nika Keita, turned 1 year old in September of last year. This project is working alongside their direwolf project, with the DNA research from both projects helping conservation efforts. As of the most recent estimates I could find, there are less than 30 red wolves left in the wild, with under 300 in captivity. It is nearly impossible to increase the wild population at this point without human intervention because the population is so low that inbreeding is a huge risk. The research and technology that's been found is huge for restoring the species and could be one of the only ways to prevent them from going extinct. Colossal has managed to hatch the first baby chicks from an artificial egg. They created a 3D printed honeycomb structure in silicone membrane meant to function as an eggshell and attempted to incubate baby chickens in these artificial eggs. Their plan ended up being a success, with 26 baby chicks being born. The point in creating artificial eggs is to pave the way to de-extinct larger bird species, like the dodo bird or the South Island moa, which require larger eggs than existing species would be able to provide. Creating an artificial egg that's the necessary size eliminates this problem. Colossal plans to conduct the same experiment with ostrich and emu eggs as well. The most complex project Colossal is currently working on is bringing back the woolly mammoth. They plan to bring back mammoths in the same way they brought back direwolves, which is by rewriting an elephant's genes to more closely match woolly mammoths. Right now, they plan to have a live birth in 2028. If this goal doesn't get moved, that means they will plant the embryo with the altered DNA by the end of this year, 2026. Along with direwolves and woolly mammoths, Colossal plans to de-extinct dodo birds and Tasmanian tigers. These are currently the 4 main de-extinction projects. De-extinction is often criticized. Some people find that it may cause funding to go to these companies instead of conservation efforts trying to prevent species from going extinct. The fact that it's a new, exciting possibility just makes more people focus on de-extinction instead of the species at risk of extinction. Some people also argue that reintroducing a species would be no different than releasing an invasive species into an ecosystem because the environments of today are significantly different than they were thousands of years ago. The existing species today have not evolved to survive alongside these ancient animals. There are benefits to de-extinction as well. Colossal uses their research to help aid in keeping endangered species alive, such as their cloning research and the research on DNA from genetically modifying different species. They're working with over 20 wildlife and conservation organizations from around the world. People argue that Colossal and other companies working on de-extinction do research that has findings that can help stop the spread of invasive species and restore ecosystems. Two of the species Colossal plans to bring back, the dodo bird and the Tasmanian tiger, went extinct because of humans, so bringing them back is like trying to right that wrong. Comment down below how you feel about de-extinction, and if you support it, which animal would you like to bring back? If you want to watch more science-related content, consider subscribing or watch one of my other videos. I highly encourage you to check out the sources listed in the description, especially the ones linking to Colossal's website. They have a lot of information about themselves and their projects they're working on. If you want to hear my thoughts, I'm still unsure about how I feel about de-extinction. I think a lot of the research they found and their partnership with conservation groups is good, but I think it's unnecessary to bring species back when the ecosystems have adjusted to function without them. I think focusing on preventing species from going extinct is more important, though I do feel somewhat passionate about how unjustified the dodo bird extinction was. I wouldn't complain about bringing them back. I do think Colossal's main goal is focused on helping our planet, and I have respect for that as someone who cares about the environment. Thank you for watching.